What's going on, my name is Bacon. Welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. This is something I've only done once, and I only did it ever on Master Duel, and that was a Raidraptor deck profile, but I've been wanting to do stuff like this for a while, like actual deck profiles like this, where I just get in, I talk about the deck that I've built in real life, and just give you guys my thoughts and all of that. I just think that's fun. And today we are doing a Cyber Dragon deck profile, because Cyber Dragon, this is by far my favorite deck ever. I absolutely adore Cyber Dragon. It is such a fun deck, and I personally feel like I play the deck actually a little bit differently than most people do. I think a lot of people, they play this deck very control based. I play it very aggressively. I don't try to go for Cyber Dragon Infinity as much. I typically go for something like Rampage Dragon as fast as I possibly can to OTK. I feel like a lot of people try to get Infinity out into the field as fast as possible. And that is something that you can do in this deck, but I wanted to play a bit more aggressive because that's the play style I prefer. So we're just going to get straight on into this. So first off, we're playing 3 copies of Cyber Dragon. This is a Cyber Dragon deck. You start on the 3 copies of Cyber Dragon as a big combo piece. It's just obvious. Like, Cyber Dragon's a really, really good card in this deck. Cyber Dragon Core, by far best normal summon in the deck. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard, and that is shared by Hers and Nashter, the only other 2 Cyber Dragon monsters that we're playing. That effect is shared where their name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field in the graveyard. Core, though, has the effect where if it's normal summoned, you add a Cyber spell or trap from deck to hand, which we don't have too many targets for. We have a lot of actually, no, never mind. Now I'm looking at it, we have a lot more targets than I initially thought. I don't even know my own deck. Ain't that fun? But this card also in the graveyard has a Cyber Dragon-like effect where you can banish it from your graveyard to special summon a Cyber Dragon monster from your deck. And you can only use 1 effect per turn and only once that turn. That's still a really, really good effect. This is a really, really good graveyard effect if you don't have, if pretty much your opponent has complete control of the game. You can just use this to summon any of your Cyber Dragon monsters and get off to a good start. But obviously the effect that this card's known for is that when it's normal summoned, you add a Cyber Spell or Trap from deck to hand, which is just really, really good. Gets to any of your combo pieces, and that's just really good. And there also is I'm not necessarily going to say combo, but I guess it is a combo. There's a 1-card combo with Cyber Dragon Core to search Power Bond. So essentially, Core searches Power Bond, which is really, really good. Next up, we're playing 3 copies of Cyber Dragon Hers. Hers is also a really good card. You can only use 1 of its effects per turn and only once that turn, where either if it's special summoned, you can make it become level 5 until the end of the turn, but then you're locked into machines. Or if it's sent to the graveyard, you add another Cyber Dragon from deck or graveyard to hand. I typically am activating that second effect. I don't really activate the special summon effect all that often, but the send the graveyard effect's really good because it gets you a search of a Cyber Dragon from deck or from graveyard, meaning if you have a core in the graveyard, you can use Hers to add the core from graveyard to hand, since its name does count as Cyber Dragon, which is really good. And next up, 2 copies of Cyber Dragon Nashter. This is your typical lineup when it comes to Cyber Dragon monsters. I have thought about putting in 1 copy of Cyber Dragon Veer, but I haven't done it quite yet, solely because I haven't really had an opportunity with which to test that out. I've only played in 1 tournament ever. This was the deck that I brought to that tournament, so this is the deck that I'm profiling. But Nash is really good because you can special summon it by discarding any monster. That's really good that it's any monster, not just Cyber Dragon or machine monsters. The fact that it's any monsters means if you have a hand trap in hand, then that's the only monster that you have in hand, you can just discard that hand trap to go in for the play. That's really good. And when it's normal or special summon, you target 1 machine monster in the graveyard, 2100 attack or defense, and special summon it, but then you're locked into machine monsters for the rest of the turn, which typically does not matter because we are pretty much only ever summoning 3 non-machine monsters, and even that's a bit of a stretch. We'll get into that later, but that's it for the Cyber Dragon monsters. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of Galaxy Soldier. It's just a really good card in this deck. Its effect to special summon itself is not once per turn, and this card with Cyber Dragon Hers in your opening hand is just an epic 2-card combo. You send you special summon the Galaxy Soldier by sending the Hers. Both of them give you searches. Galaxy Soldier adds a Galaxy Soldier. Hers adds Cyber Dragon. You activate the second Galaxy Soldier's effect to special summon itself, pitching the Cyber Dragon. You now have 2 level 5 light machine monsters on your side of the field to go into a Nova, to go into an Infinity. Boom, you profit. Epic stuff. Next up, we're playing one copy of Cyber Dark Chimera. So, as I said, this is a deck that this is the way I want to play this deck is I want to be very aggressive. And as a result, I want to get to Power Bond as fast as possible because Power Bond's going to allow you to OTK. Chimera discards a spell or trap to add Power Bond from deck to hand. That is an incredible effect because it's the Scar to Power Bond Searcher, and we have a Searcher for the Searcher in this deck in the form of Cyber Dark Realm, which we'll get into later, which is searchable off of Core. So basically the combo comes down to Core searches Realm, Realm searches Chimera, Chimera searches Power Bond, Core searches Power Bond. Let's go, we profit. Epic stuff. This card is also really good because the first time that you would fusion summon this turn, the first time you would fusion summon this turn, you can also use cards from your graveyard as material. So it turns your Power Bond into an Overload fusion as well, which is really, really powerful. The only downside for this card is that you can only use Dragon or Machine Cyber Monsters as fusion material this turn. That's totally fine because those are the only cards we're ever going to be using anyway, because all of our fusion monsters require Cyber Dragon monsters. So that automatically means, that automatically means that we have to use Cyber Monsters. Anyway, so that literally does not matter. This card also has an effect that we're not going to use, and it's this one, so I'm not even going to bother reading it because this is the only Cyber Dark monster we play in the entire deck, so that effect will never pop up. Next up, we're playing one copy of Jisakiru, the Star Destroying Kaiju. The only reason we're playing this one over something like Gamma Steel is because this card is a light machine monster, so to synergize with the deck, and it's also searchable off of Cyber Repair Point, so that's the only reason we're playing this one over any other Kaiju in the game. For the hand traps, we're running 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Makes sense. It's the best hand trap in the game. Like, this is just obvious. And then 3 copies of DD Crow, because DD Crow is completely just taken over the meta as one of the best hand traps, solely because for what it can do against Tearlament, which is just incredible. For the spells, we're running 1 copy of Monster Reborn. This should come as no surprise. I mean, it's Monster Reborn. Most decks run this. The only ones that don't are the ones that aren't that graveyard reliant. But Monster Reborn's a really, really good card. It's a great combo extender to go into a bunch of plays. So this card's really good. And to add on to that, we also play 1 copy of Cyber Rev System because it's essentially for this deck a second copy of Monster Reborn that then gives the monster we summon protection from being destroyed by card effects, which is really, really powerful. We're playing 1 copy of Foolish Burial so we can get the exact card we need in the graveyard when we need it. Typically off this, you're sending a copy of Cyber Dragon Hearse to get the search and Call by the Grave just so we can stop our opponent from hand trapping us. These should all make sense if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh! Next up, we're playing 3 copies of Cyber Emergency because this card adds any Cyber Dragon monster from deck to hand, which is really good. And if it's negated by your opponent, you can discard a card to add this card back to your hand. So if it gets negated, you can just add it back to your hand, which is really, really good. Next up, we're playing 1 copy of Cyber Repair Point. You can very easily get away with 2 copies of this card. I will admit that right off the bat. You can get away with 2 copies of this card. I am only running the 1 copy because I just needed the space, and I didn't want to run a 41 card deck because that's the type of person I am. I'm not a huge fan of running 41 card decks. I like running just the base 40 card deck, so I didn't have space, so this card just had to be dropped. But Cyber Repair Point is a really, really good card because it doesn't, unlike Cyber Emergency that says you have to add a Cyber Dragon monster, Cyber Repair Point just says that you add a light machine monster from deck to hand. And the only requirement is that you have to have a Cyber Dragon in your graveyard, which is very, very easy in a deck like this. This card can add both Galaxy Soldier and Jisakiru, which is just a really, really powerful thing to do. And I guess it could even technically, oh no, that's deck to hand, never mind, not graveyard. Oh, I guess, if I could, there we go. Technically you can do this. This is an effect you typically don't use. Target a light machine monster in your graveyard, shuffle that target into the deck. You don't really use that. If it pops up, sure, you can use it, but you can use this effect to get some of your extra deck monsters back into the graveyard, like even a copy of actually Zeus. You can get Zeus back into the extra deck to use it again, which is really, really powerful. Next up, we're playing 1 copy of Cyberload Fusion. This is a card I don't really use all that often because I don't really see much of a opportunity to use it. But it is a very, very good card because you just fusion summon. You fusion summon a card that lists Cyber Dragon as material by shuffling the fusion materials from the back into the deck from cards on the field or face up banished. The only downside is that the only monster that can summon the turn this card is activated is the monster you fusion summon. But this could be just a very, very helpful way to get into your copy of Rampage Dragon as fast as you possibly can, and it is searchable off of Cyber Dragon Core. Speaking of that, by the way, something you might be weird about, I have it right here in the side of deck. I am not main decking Overload Fusion. So, and I'll get into this, because a lot of people main deck Overload Fusion. I understand why they do, but I'm going to explain to you guys why I am not main decking Overload Fusion. So, Overload Fusion says that you fusion summon a Dark Machine Fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your field or graveyard, which immediately gets you to your Rampage Dragon. Everyone runs Overload Fusion because it immediately gets you to a copy of Rampage Dragon to go in for some heavy damage. I am not main decking Overload Fusion for two reasons. One, since I'm playing a bit more of an aggressive build, I want to bring out Rampage Dragon with Power Bond. I do not want to bring it out with something like Overload Fusion, where it doesn't get the double attack. And Overload Fusion is not searchable in this deck. It is not searchable. It used to be searchable before Anaconda got banned, but Anaconda rightly got banned, and so this card is no longer searchable. Power Bond is searchable in this deck off of Chimera. Cyberload Fusion is searchable off of Core. So Overload Fusion not being searchable, to me, hinders this card's effectiveness drastically. So that's why I'm not running it. I don't really see room. If I did side deck this card in during one duel that I had, but typically you're not, typically I don't really like this card solely for the fact that it's not searchable and it only can bring out your copy of Rampage Dragon. This is the only card I can bring out, and as I said before, I only want to bring this card out with Power Bond because it gets the double attack that way. So that's the only reason I'm not main decking Overload Fusion. And speaking of Power Bond, we're playing 2 copies of Power Bond. So Power Bond is incredibly powerful, and if you're wondering, Power Bond is a card I want to get to as fast as I possibly can, and if you're wondering why I'm not playing 3 copies of it, same thing with Cyber Repair Point. I just sort of didn't have room for the 3rd copy of it, which might seem weird because, as I said, I want to get to this card as fast as I possibly can, so why wouldn't I play 3? Well, not only did I not have the room, the card is searchable, so I didn't feel the need to play the 3rd copy of Power Bond, but this card is really good because you just fusion summon a machine fusion monster for your extra deck by using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. Keep in mind, if you use Chimera, you can also banish cards from your graveyard as material for this. And it gains attack equal to its original attack, so it just completely doubles its attack points. And then during the end phase of the turn this card is activated, you take damage equal to the amount of attack gained from this effect at the time of the summon. That is totally fine because you're typically when we activate this card, we're going in for the OTK anyway, and even if our opponent does negate the Power Bond, we're typically not losing off that effect. We're only usually taking 2100 damage, so that's totally fine. Machine Duplication is really good, so for anyone that doesn't know what this card does, pretty much in a Cyber Dragon deck, this card is insane. You target a machine monster, you control a 500 or less attack, and you special summon up to 2 monsters from your deck with the same name as that face-up monster. So since Cyber Dragon Core, Cyber Dragon Hers, and Cyber Dragon Nashter, all of them have the effect where their name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard, and all of them have 500 or less attack. If you normal summon any of them, their name is now Cyber Dragon. You can use Machine Duplication to special summon from your deck 2 Cyber Dragon, not Core's, not Hers', not Nashter's. Since their name is Cyber Dragon, you special summon 2 Cyber Dragon from your deck in face-up attack position. Go ahead, Xyz summon, you go and profit. Epic card. This card's insane. I used to only play this card at 2, and then I was like, wait, I should probably play this card at 3 just so I can get to it more often, because similarly to Overload Fusion, this card is not searchable. So that's why we're playing this card at 3. Next up, we're playing 1 copy of Cyber Dark Realm. This card, when it's activated, you add a Cyber Dark monster from deck to hand, which is always going to be your copy of Chimera, since that's the only target you have for it. This card also has a really good effect, where during your main phase, you can immediately after this effect, During your main phase, you can, immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon 1 Cyber Dark monster, which is great because it basically just gives you additional normal summon of Chimera. You search it and then you immediately normal summon it off this card's effect, so therefore you do not waste your normal summon. And then obviously Chimera, it's a search power bond, all you have to do is discard a spell or trap, which is really, really easy to do, especially since we're playing 19 spells and traps. This card is really good to do that. This is a fantastic card overall in this deck, solely to search Chimera. And here's a weird thing about this. If you are going second and your opponent has like 1 face down, right? and you do this combo to get to your copy of Power Bond, right? If you successfully do this whole combo without getting negated, and you bring out your copy of Rampage Dragon will then destroy up to 2 spells and traps in the field. That can be your copy of Realm in your opponent's other face down. Because typically you're only going to blow up your opponent's face down, but trust me, Cyberdark Realm is useless after you search Chimera. This card is completely useless after you search Chimera, because it has an additional effect that only affects Cyberdark monsters, and it just does not matter for Chimera, because Chimera is typically not going to benefit off this effect. You can blow this card up just to free up your spell trap card zone. That is something I recommend you do, unless your opponent has multiple spells and traps you need to destroy off of Rampage Dragon's effect. But Realm is a really, really good card overall. Just keep in mind that you don't need it after you search Chimera. You literally do not need it after you search and summon Chimera. For the traps, we're also playing 1 copy of Cybernetic Overflow. This came up so many times, and it cannot be understated how often this card actually popped up. More often than I think it probably should. What this card does is you banish Cyber Dragons with different levels from your hand, face-up field, and/or graveyard, and then destroy an equal number of cards your opponent controls. So what that means is that you can banish from your graveyard, say, a Cyber Dragon, a Core, and a Hers, to destroy up to 3 cards your opponent controls. That is really good. And then it also has an effect that typically doesn't get activated, but if this card on the field is destroyed by a card effect, you can add a Cyber Spell or Trap from deck to hand. That is totally fine, because typically we're not using that effect. We're usually just using this card for its first effect to destroy up to 3 cards our opponent controls by banishing those 3 monsters. And this card's also really good because it sets up your Cyber Load Fusion for the Fusion Summon, which is really good. And lastly, we're playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence to round out the deck, because this card, just monster negate, really, really powerful card. We're not doing the side deck because from what I've seen, the side deck is sort of dependent on what your locals tournament is running. This is my side deck for if you want to copy mine. We're playing Overload, Harpies, 2 Twin Twister, 3 Cosmic, 3 D-Barrier, 3 Droll, and 2 Ghost Spell. That is what we're playing in the side. That is what I'm playing in the side. You can change it up to how you like, but from what I've seen, the side deck is solely dependent on what your locals is playing. So we're not doing anything with the side. We're going straight into the extra deck. So first off, Rampage Dragon, 2 copies of it. This card's really good. When this card is fusion summoned, you can target spell and traps on the field up to the number of materials used for this card's fusion summon and destroy them. And once per turn, you can send up to 2 light machine monsters from your deck to the grave. And if you do, this card, for each monster sent to the graveyard, this card gains 1 additional attack during each battle phase's turn. And if you bring this card out with Power Bond, this card comes out to 4,200. You destroy up to 2 spells and traps your opponent. There's 2 spells and traps on the field, and it gets 3 attacks. That is insane, because this card comes out to 42 and it gets 3 attacks. That is 12,600 damage in a game that starts you off with 8,000 life points. This is your OTK machine. This is the card I always try to summon as fast as I possibly can. Definite 2. Definitely play this card at 2. I used to play it at 3 solely because I wanted to make sure I actually had an additional copy with which to get to, but obviously I'm no longer playing it at 3. I've replaced the 3rd copy with a copy of Zeus, is what I'm going to say. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of Twin Dragon. Twin Dragon's really good because it makes 2 attacks, but it makes 2 attacks and it has more base attack than Rampage Dragon. So if you bring this card out with something like Power Bond, it does come out to 56, and with 2 attacks, that's 11,200 damage, which is respectable. I prefer Rampage Dragon because it does more damage and it pops spells and traps, but if you need a bigger beater, like if 4,200 isn't enough, maybe 5,600 will be enough, and Twin Dragon's a really good card for you to bring out for that specific reason. And we are playing the 1 copy of Cyber End Dragon. I kid you not, only playing this solely because we have an opportunity. We can play it. Like we have room in the extra deck to play it. It typically doesn't pop up, but if you do bring this card out with something like Power Bond, it comes out to 8,000 and it does piercing damage, which is just really, really good. Next up, we're playing 1 copy of Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon. This card is about to get some new support in the form of Clockwork Knight. And very, very soon will this card be getting that support card. And it's not even meant for this card. What this card does is it gains 1,000. Its attack becomes 1,000 times the number of materials used for its special summon. It cannot be fusion summoned. It has to be special summoned by sending the above cards from either field to the graveyard. And it's just Cyber Dragon and 1+ machine monsters. So if you have a Cyber Dragon on your side of the field and your opponent's playing machine, let's say they have their entire board filled up with machine monsters, that's 6 monsters, you just normal summon something like hers, immediately bring this card out with 7,000 attack by using your hers, and then all 6 monsters they control, assuming all of them are machines. And this is a contact fuse, meaning it's not an effect. This card is not an effect that activates, so your opponent can't negate it. This is essentially just a tribute summon, so that's just really, really powerful. And this card is, when Clockwork Knight comes out, this card's going to be absolutely insane. I might consider dropping the End Dragon for a second copy of Fortress Dragon. I kid you not, because this card's about to get even better with Clockwork Knight coming out. Because for anyone that doesn't know, I don't know, can I see it here? I should be able to see it here. Clockwork Knight. So Clockwork Knight, this comes out in the TCG 4 days after the recording of this video. Less than a week away. Clockwork Knight has the effect where all face-up monsters in the field become machine. The rest of the effect does not matter. That is the only effect that matters, because if all face-up monsters become machine, you can just do the exact same thing. No matter what deck your opponent's playing, you can just activate Clockwork Knight. All their monsters in that machine, normal summon hers, link and fuse them all away for a copy of I've forgotten your name. Why am I Fortress Dragon? It also has the effect where all machine monsters you control gain 500, all machine monsters your opponent control lose 500. This is a definite 3-up in the deck. Once it comes out in TCG, this is a definite 3-up, in my opinion, in the deck. Maybe a 2-up because we don't play any Earth machines, but this is definitely a card that I will be adding in solely to, because it's just going to be such a fun card to bring out the Fortress Dragon. That's insane. Next up, we are playing the 1 copy of Mega Fleet Dragon. Mega Fleet Dragon is really good because it can, it's very, very similar to Fortress Dragon. This card has the exact same effect, except it gains 1,200 times the number of materials used for it. That's its attack. But its fusion requirements are different. Fortress requires Cyber Dragon and 1+ machine monsters. This requires 1 Cyber Dragon monster, specifically a monster, not specifically Cyber Dragon. And 1+ monsters in the extra monster zone, meaning that you can just link it, you can just deal with any of your opponent's link monsters. This is a card that deals with any of your opponent's link monsters, regardless of its type, which is just really good. This card is really good just to get rid of their link monsters. That is the only reason we play this card in the deck. Fortress Dragon, I would say, is better for mirror matches. Mega Fleet Dragon is really good, is better overall because pretty much every deck runs at least 1 link monster. Next up, we are playing the 2 copies of Cyber Dragon Infinity because it is a once per turn negation that can gobble up your opponent's monsters and gains attack when it does that. Nova is solely in here because we can Xyz summon Infinity using Nova, but I do sometimes keep Nova out into the field because it has the effect where you can detach from material, the target a Cyber Dragon monster, in your graveyard and special summon it. And you can banish a Cyber Dragon from your hand or face up from your monster zone to have this card gain 2,100 attack until the end of your turn, putting up to 4,200 attack, which is really powerful. And if this card in your possession is sent to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a machine fusion monster from your extra deck, which can automatically summon out your copy of Cyber End Dragon, which is really, really powerful. Next up, we are playing 1 copy of Consar Pleiades. Pleiades is just really, Pleiades, however you pronounce it, Pleiades is a really, really good card because it just bounces a card back to your opponent's hand by detaching material, and it's very easily summonable because it just takes 2 of 5 late monsters. Cyber Dragon qualifies for that. And since we are playing a bunch of Xyz monsters, Zeus comes in because we can make Zeus just by using an Xyz monster that we control as material, assuming any Xyz monster attack this turn. That is just really, really powerful because this card has the effect where we can detach 2 materials to send all other cards on the field to the graveyard. Which is just incredibly powerful because typically if you play this deck the way I play it, when you bring out Infinity, you go Cyber Dragon, Xyz them into a Nova, Xyz them into Infinity, gobble up one of your opponent's monsters. Infinity now has 4 material. You can attack with Infinity, main phase 2, make Zeus with 5 material in this deck. So that's just really, really powerful, and it's not once per turn, so you can get 2 board wipes with this card, which is just incredible. Next up, we're playing 1 copy of Seeger. I honestly am tempted to bump this card up to 2. I am very, very tempted, and if I do, I think honestly what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop an Infinity and a Nova, play another copy of Seeger, and play another copy of Fortress Dragon. I might also drop the End Dragon for a another Link monster. I don't know what I would do quite yet, but Seeger is just a really good card. I always want to be there. Its name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard, and during each battle phase, if this card is not declared an attack, we can target a machine monster we control with 2100 or more attack, and for the rest of this turn, that monster gains 2100 attack and defense, and neither player takes any battle damage from attacks involving Seeger for the rest of this turn. That is really good because you can use this in combination with something like Rampage Dragon to put it up not only with Power Bond to 42 with 3 attacks, combine that with Seeger, and now has 6300 attack with 3 attacks, which just ups it even more than 18,900 damage, which is just absolutely insane. Next up, we also play 1 copy of Linkuriboh. We have a lot of level 1s in this deck. Well, by a lot, I mean, besides DD Crow, because we're never summoning DD Crow, hers, and Nashter. But that's still really good. We can use the Linkuriboh to link the hers away to immediately get a search, and Linkuriboh is just a really good card overall because it can just make your one of your opponent's monsters attack 0, and Owl Mirage as well because we can use this to link away a core to get some extra protection on our side of the field. So and that's just really, really powerful as well. So that's it for the deck. I really hope you guys enjoy. If you want to see more of this, you guys can. These are all the decks that I have, by the way. These are all the decks that I have. So if you want to see any of these deck profiles, I even have a few more that I actually haven't even built, but if you want to see any of these deck profiles, definitely leave a comment down below telling me which deck profile you guys would like to see next. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you slap that like button and subscribe for more. I hope to see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.